but I want to talk a little bit about you and your career. 30 years as an investigative journalist.
Yes.
Asking a different sort of question than you asked today.
Yeah.
Really going inside and trying to get under the hood, so to speak, of business and business leaders.
Yes.
And uncover what's wrong.
I was passionate about it.
You're great at it.
I still am. I still believe in it. I mean, I think that we need both. I think that, well, on a good day, I really did feel like I could change the world. I mean, I was fascinated by how things are made. I really wanted to know. I loved going into a factory. I loved seeing how something was put together. And I really wanted to speak for the little guy also in terms of what we didn't know that we should know.
The little guy. Who's the little guy?
Well,
the consumer?
Yeah. I mean, what advertising says is not always the complete truth. And I think a lot of companies also didn't know what consumers really wanted. I remember doing a story about bleached coffee filters. White coffee filters that we had in America, and I noticed that the manufacturer in Sweden, that they were brown, they weren't bleached. So turns out I tested them, and pouring boiling water through a bleached coffee filter takes the dioxin out of the coffee filter and into your cup of coffee. And so I called the company and said, well, why not have unbleached coffee filters for American consumers? And they said, no American consumers would ever buy brown coffee filters. They only want sparkling white bleached paper products. Well, that wasn't really the case, and consumers contacted the manufacturer, were outraged about it, and we had brown coffee filters in 6 months,
But so not just the consumer, but also the worker. I know one of the stories that you won awards for involved a large athletic shoe company. And
yes, yeah, and
production
this goes
in
into
East Asia.
subcontracting, that when you subcontract, you don't always know how things are made. So the advertising that you do and selling the shoes, of course, is talking about being a great global citizen. But the factory workers who are making less than the minimum wage in that country, and in some cases being physically abused, that's the story that you're not going to see unless we can bring that to you. So, I liked doing those stories. I really bounded out of bed in the morning to do them. I feel the same way about Aim to Flourish, though, that I am learning. I'm a student, really, if anything, I'm a professional student more than a journalist or anything else, learning about these amazing revelations in terms of businesses all over the world that are tackling big society problems, that are making a difference, that are tackling, whether they know it or not, the UN Sustainable Development Goals in terms of what they're doing for peace or water issues or the environment or gender equality, education for all. I mean, these are really important things that in order to have the world that we all want and to make it a sustainable world, or I would go farther and say a flourishing world, we need the next business leaders to be thinking about that. And so Aim to Flourish gives students, management students, an opportunity to go out and interview somebody they admire who is doing it right, find out why they're doing it right, what inspired them, write up that story and share it with the world, publish it on Aim to Flourish. I'm just in awe of the ideas that are coming in, and we're going to celebrate the best of the best that represent the 17 Sustainable Development Goals in June 2017. So we have our work cut out for us because it's going to be hard, because there's a lot of good ones.
So you're still bounding out of bed.
I still am, yeah. It's really exciting.
That's great. I intrigued by the way you described that and your transition from investigative journalist to working with Aim to Flourish. And it reminds me of something Carolyn Wu. Carolyn Wu was a dean at Mendoza School at Notre Dame and was pretty involved with the ACSB. Now she's CEO of Catholic Relief Services. And she did a speech for us very recently, and she said, we need for the world to think of business, not necessarily as a necessary evil, is kind of what the
Yeah.
world sometimes thinks about as business, but really as a
That's
necessary good,
Yeah.
is what she said.
I take responsibility for contributing to that.
Yeah.
I mean, I do know that a lot of my stories, I think, led to people just kind of shrugging their shoulders also. Like, what am I supposed to do about that? And to being turned off. I mean, it's not inspiring. And with Aim to Flourish, you know, we're learning about untold stories about business for good. And I really think it is a movement. And I think there's also a movement in the media that, you know, there's an understanding now that, just telling stories that are negative, that kind of lead to despair, turns people off. And I think there's a hunger in the world for, tell me who is doing it right. And my fantasy or goal with the website is that Aim to Flourish will be a place where consumers will go to find out who is doing it right, where social impact investors will say, these are really cool things going on out in the wilds of the world that I want to invest in that, which would be a win-win for the company and for the social impact investor. And I think the media is going to also find really great stories about this business for good movement and really interesting characters out there who are passionate about meeting a global goal. So it's a lot of fun.